Good morning, Kalimera. I hope you like GIFs because the presentation has a lot of them. I hope it makes you laugh. It's very tough to follow Aaron. He made a great job. I'm going to talk today about the rise of communities, and later I'm going to ask the question if the rise is actually the right title or I made it wrong before I wrote the speech. We talk about a journey from social media to the Metaverse, but we start with all of you and kind of the beginning of your lives. I've been told that it's a bit slow. So there you see the first GIF, and it works. I today speak on behalf of myself, not on behalf of Facebook, while I work for them full time. Bear that in mind, as I might have biases, as most of you do, or we all do. But I speak on behalf also of the Restate Foundation. Restate Foundation is an attempt by us to try to reimagine global governance, how we can work together as people, how we can come together and use technology, build communities, and do more research into the terms of the things that we are struggling to fight with our big problems today with nation states and barriers that we have. And I'll come to that a bit later. I'm passionate about breaking borders, building communities, spreading positivity, but also about progressive politics. So again, I'm showing you this to know that I have a lot of biases, and you can maybe hear some of them by looking at what I'm passionate about, because I think that tells a lot about me. So let's start at the very beginning of all of your lives. You might be familiar with this. This is from The Lion King. And I chose this because it is a symbol for birth, but also about all the expectations and things that are assigned to us even before we are born or when we are born. So let's start. There are 5 things that are given to you kind of the moment that you're born. The first thing before you're born is you're assigned to parents or to one parent. That's already one thing that you didn't choose. The second thing, when you're born, most of the times you're given a name. Again, a name that you didn't choose. Next thing, or slightly before that, a doctor mostly makes the call, what is your sex? Again, often associated with the gender, a gender that you didn't choose. What then comes with that, when you have a name, a sex, then you might be entitled to get a birth certificate. A birth certificate gives you a lot of rights and obligations in a certain nation state. Again, you did nothing to choose that privilege, those rights, those obligations. But all of these things are given to you. And these 5 things that I just mentioned make up for a lot of the identities that we inherit and believe in for a long time. Probably most of you still hold those. I mentioned 4. The 5th one is shortly after, depending on where you live, the culture that you live in, often you're baptized. Baptized, again, a religion that you didn't choose. You're mostly too young to make that choice. So all of those are things that you didn't choose, but they're given to you. But they make up a big part of your identity and your life. But I can tell you there's something that is way stronger than all of the things that are given to you, and that's the power of choice. And that's something that you choose deliberately. And I think that thing is community. Community is something that you choose, or you can choose if you want to, and if you want to break some of those boundaries that were given onto you from basically the birth or the beginning of your life. So what is community? Community comes from a Latin word, communis, which means common or something that we share. I think with that, I want to ask you the question. Jump on Slido and answer me this short question. Are we in this room today, and those of us watching online, are we a community? 3 people participated, 100% say yes. I think this question reveals a lot about, not about like the definition of community, but actually reveals more about the person who is answering this question. There could be some people who say, yes, we are a community. There could be that particular member. Some say maybe some of us don't feel that way, or not yet. But the important part is how that member feels. So when we talk about communities, there's a lot of different types of communities, but in the end, I think what is really important are deep and meaningful communities, meaningful relationships. And how are those defined? I have a short explanation that might be, again, biased from what I've learned, from what I believe it is. But be free to discuss that with me. You can always put comments on Slido. I think there's two things. One thing that we receive as being part of a community, and one thing that we give. What we receive in a community that is meaningful to us and really deep is a sense of belonging that can be equal to identity, a sense of connection. We feel connected to each other. So maybe a lot of you answered, yes, we are a community. That probably means that you're connected. But also you feel a sense of safety. Safety, not always in physical safety, but also safety to be who you want to be, to express your opinion, to share what you want to share. But it's not a one-sided street. We see it in media a lot. Media developed over time, and that's also what explains a bit the rise of communities, is something that you receive, but you also give. You give trust. We talked a lot about trust yesterday and today. You trust those people in your community, people that you're familiar with, as Aaron said, more than others. And you also give investment. Investment not only in monetary terms, but investment of time, of being there, of listening, of providing answers, but also asking questions. And there's really a community for everything. And that shows you a bit of the rise of community today. I want to give you a couple of examples. That's a completely different talk, the power of community and what kind of communities exist. But I'll start with some that I'm familiar with. You see here a community from Germany, which is vegan bodybuilders. I'm not sure how many of you would have just come up with the term and thought, oh yeah, that's a community that must be very strong. They're quite strong. There are more than 50,000 members in Germany. It's all about sports, nutrition, and how to come together. Of course, in that community, they're very strong, very closely connected to each other. The other community that I mentioned here is the Wall Street boys from Reddit. A community online, probably many of them haven't even met yet, but they were strong enough to discuss and take actions that many of you might have followed, that literally rose a stock against very strong investment agencies and investment banks to make them go bankrupt, just by them as individuals taking small actions, and all of them amounted in challenging one of the biggest banks in the history in the financial system. And then a lot of you might be familiar with some of these logos. One of them is here from Thessaloniki. Those are football clubs. If you believe it or not, go to a football match and look at hardcore fans. Those are strong communities. They don't care what religions you have if you score a goal for them. They don't care what skin color you have or where you come from or what you believe in. That's a strong community. And if somebody is in need, they will help out. And they will answer their questions. They will come together in times of need. It's sometimes ridiculed by, oh, that's crazy what you follow. But it's not more crazy than other communities that exist. It's just a very strong and deep, meaningful community. Now, if you look at the stats today, and that's why I question if it's the rise of community, communities have always existed as long as human beings have existed. But it was really in social media where we see even more of those, and even faster. They're easier to discover, easier to create, and it's easier to connect with one another. Based on a survey from the Global Web Index last year, 76% of internet users participated in an online community. that doesn't mean that they're all meaningfully connected to it yet, but you can see the trend where it's going. There's so many of us participating, wanting to be part of a community. And as I love to crash borders, I would definitely tell you that you know the famous saying, the sky is the limit. The sky was never the limit. The sky was never the limit. And I proved to you that shortly after the first robot landed on Mars, humans have already been on Mars. You might ask, okay, that's a bit of a bold statement, but people have been. Actually, a small community of German members who use Oculus Quest, virtual reality glasses, who used live footage of the planet of Mars just a few days after the robot landed to make an excursion onto Mars, feeling it as immersive as you can, reaching Mars way before Elon Musk can ever dream about it. And they have now, almost every week, they walk on Mars because they built this live footages from NASA together into a virtual environment and can walk on Mars. That is just one side where communities are going. That's using virtual reality. But if you think that that was far, then I'll tell you where we can go even further from that. So the next question for you is, I can see just a few of you wearing glasses today. My question for you is, do you believe you will be wearing some kind of glasses in the next 10 to 15 years? I would love to hear your answer and see how much you're aware of that. Okay, the answers are coming in. We see a couple of you already got the trend or are looking at it, or they already wear glasses. Some say probably, and some ask the question, what for? What for? I'm going to tell you. I just showed you that virtual reality that is currently using glasses. I framed the question on the slide, some sort of glasses. Glasses are now considered by many futurists, by many technology companies, as one way into the next step of the Metaverse. And I will tell you what the Metaverse is, and probably I'll leave you with more questions than answers at the moment, but I think that's good enough because we need all of you to populate what that's going to be. So I think we can go back to the slides. Thank you. So what is the Metaverse? You might have heard it. Mark Zuckerberg famously said recently that Facebook is transitioning from being a social media company to becoming a Metaverse company. Many companies have shared similar interests and ambitions before, like Microsoft, graphic companies. But the term comes from actually a kind of science fiction novel from 1992. So it's not something entirely new. It's just that we're getting closer to what we imagine this could be. The Metaverse is, if I would describe it, and there's probably many different definitions of it, a coming together of three worlds. One, the physical world. You see here a picture of us on the first night. That's the physical world. That's what we all experience today. The second part is virtual reality. Some of you might have tried it. This is a famous game, Beat Saber, where you're completely in a different universe using glasses today, where nothing is real, everything is virtual. And then you have augmented reality. I don't know how many of you played Pokemon Go, one of the fastest adopted app in history. That is augmented reality. So different than the virtual reality, it is in our physical environment, but we see something that is not there, that is virtual, that is projected there, like the Pokemon that we see today. And the Metaverse, if you try to imagine that, is all of the three things combined. So imagine this, that while you are all sitting here, the audience online, that now is online, would sit here as holograms, and you would see them. You would feel a sense of shared space, because they're sitting next to you. You can see them as an avatar, as a hologram. They could see you, And at the same time, there are companies today that develop, for example, gloves that you could even shake their hands and you would feel the pressure, how a handshake would feel like. You could see with tracking how their mimic and gesticulation is just by looking at them. That's some of the things that are already there today. But when all of this comes together, at any point in time, that's when there's kind of a state that we call the metaverse. And I think to get a real sense of that, I have a couple of videos depending on the matter of time, and if you are interested to see it, we can take a look at it. But it's really when you immerse yourself into it, then that's when you feel the real power of this. If you ask me, the metaverse is the closest thing that we can come close to teleporting. Teleporting has been a dream of humans, thinking that we can transcend time and space just by jumping somewhere. But this is really, you can be anywhere at any time. Anyone can invite you to out of space to be on Mars and discuss with your friends while at the same time calling your grandparent on a video call and them being there. And it's seamless and it's instant and in real time. I called it immerse yourself into your own community always at every given time. You can design your own environment. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in this. The opportunities from, there's already now digital outfits. There are people designing digital outfits, and there are people willing to pay for that. There's always a multiple $100 million industry behind this, of people buying virtual clothes. There's, in the metaverse as we kind of expect it to be today, is there's no logging in or out. It's just there all of the time as in your experience. There will be holograms next to you if you want them to be there, depending on how you choose to see them. There's also no separate technologies. All of the technologies should be defined as interoperable, so there's no iMessage or WhatsApp that is separate. You can communicate at all times seamlessly without choosing that app, or as you might remember from if you play PlayStation, waiting for the next update to happen. You will have virtual decentralized currencies, and it's literally limitless in opportunities, but also bear in mind new challenges. I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh yeah, it's all going to be amazing. I think that's what's really important, and I ask you to be aware of those, that there will be challenges. And I listed some of those challenges on the next slide. I'm sure there's going to be way more than those. So fasten your seatbelt. There's a lot of things coming. If you thought that social media was fast, imagine a metaverse where holograms can sit next to you. You can do whatever you want. People can do whatever they want. Can bring people together in a limitless space. There's even concerts now that have reached 12 million people at the same time. How do you moderate that? How do you bring people together? How do you monitor those trends? And the question I ask myself, coming from a also governance perspective, who is responsible for building public spaces in the metaverse? Will it all be owned by private companies, or will there actually be virtual space designers by governments to bring together places where people come together, discuss, share things, enjoy culture? Who is responsible for safekeeping? At the moment, we really have a big gap that national governments are not really apt to regulate any of the things that are going on in social media. What if we emerge closer to the metaverse faster than we are today, and the speed is already fast? Decentralization will be a key part of that, but how do we ensure that this is really decentralized and not taking a big proportion of big oligopoles that we see today with Google, Facebook, Amazon deciding a lot about the future we all live in. Accessibility, how do we make sure that everyone can participate, doesn't have to participate, so that you're not left out. Not everyone has to be part of the virtual experience at all the times. They can, but making them able to jump in and experience some of the things that we experience should be able for everyone. I think what I'm really passionate about is elections and campaigning. Who makes sure that campaigning and elections are really safe? If there's no limit to spaces, if you can send a hologram to talk to every single individual voter, how do you make sure that this is done right and not manipulating people in a crazy amount? So that's going to be really interesting. And one thing that Aaron talked about, how also debunking misinformation and restoring trust in that space. That is, looks a bit like science fiction, but it's way beyond science fiction, has so many more applications. And with that, I want to close and want to ask you whether you become a digital outfit designer, a conversions fact checker, virtual space, public space designer. Remember me as you put on your glasses in the next 10 to 15 years, because you probably need them, maybe not. I said some kind of glasses. That's what we currently believe, that we'll be able to be part of that community. Remember me and think about kind of all the challenges that are ahead of us and use it responsibly and be part of it, because community and creators will be at the very core of what we believe the metaverse will be. Thank you very much.